Thanks everyone for attending. We are Imovat and Anchor. We both work at the system management team at SUSE, which everyone calls the YaST team. And that I guess in the future everybody will call the Agama team, because that's what we want to talk about, how the evolution of YaST, called Agama, will help you to deploy SUSE Linux Enterprise 16 and all the products and distributions based on it. So we will first start with some general concepts that I believe that are important to know to understand the role of the installer in SLES 16. Then we will jump right away to a live demo of this new installer working. And then we will see how all those technologies you have seen during the demo could fit into the different scenarios of unattended installation, which focus on AutoYaST compatibility. And finally, we will see some short-term and mid-term plans. Of course, have room for your questions. So let's start with that, let's say, theoretical part. And as many of you know, one of the goals of SLES 16 or the SUSE 16 family in general is to ease the deployment of the operating system by just using a pre-built image and then handing control over to standard configuration tools. So in that regard, if you look at that graph, what we want to do is to make that line between configuration and deployment to be more clear. And that's something that YaST and AutoYaST is not really helping to do, because YaST and AutoYaST are both installers and configuration tools. And they usually mix both processes together. But the idea with, as I already said, with SLES 16 is that most of deployments should be possible just using a pre-built image, and then you customize a little bit using ignition or combustion or cloud init, and depending on the environment, and then you hand over to your configuration management system. Let's say Ansible, let's say Salt, maybe using Cockpit for occasional tweaks. But we know that dumping an image is not a solution in all possible scenarios. So for that, we also want to provide a more, let's call it, traditional installation process, like you do with YaST or AutoYaST, in which you actually configure the network, connect to your network-based storage devices, and then set up some RAID or LVM or things like that on top, and then you install all the RPMs packages to finally have a system you can reboot into. And from that point, you should be able to use Ansible, Salt, etc. So we want that whatever is the method we are using for deployment, like a more modern image-based one or a more traditional installation similar to YaST, both systems will look the same from that line above. So for the configuration tools, for Ansible, for Cockpit, it shouldn't matter how you configure how you deploy the system. And that's, as I said, a problem, because usually YaST and AutoYaST go farther and step a bit into the configuration tools toes. So now I want to focus on the right bottom part of that schema, which is the, as I call it, traditional installation. And I want to do it by seeing some differences we have with SLES 15 and SLES 16. As you know, for SLES 15, you will usually use YaST or AutoYaST to install, depending whether it's an unattended installation or a interactive one. And you know that to execute YaST, you will boot the installation media, which is in the end basically a small Linux distribution, a very small system that is just used to execute YaST and AutoYaST. It's special in many ways. For example, it doesn't run systemd or nothing like that. And to boot that installation media, to boot that mini Linux that then you use to run YaST, there is a small component called LinuxRC that you may be aware of it or not, but you likely have used it when you are, for example, booting the installation media and providing some booting parameters to things like pre-configuring the network or activating some mainframe devices and so on. It's actually LinuxRC who takes care of those parameters and then boot the system and then hands over into YaST. As I said, in SLES 16, we want to replace YaST and AutoYaST both with Agama, and because Agama can perform both unattended and interactive installation. Actually, it's a bit of a different story, but we will see it during the presentation. But one of the points is that Agama can run on top of any Linux. It doesn't need to run on that super tailored minimal installation image. So since it can run on any Linux distribution or any Linux, SUSE Linux system, we are using as an installation media just a regular SUSE live system. That comes with some advantages, like for example, you could just do zipper, install your favorite tools there in the installation media and run your scripts and so on. It's not a limited system anymore. But also to boot it, we are just using the regular way of booting a system. That, for those knowing the more technical details, that's very good. Why I'm explaining all this? Well, because if you are used to those Linux RC parameters and you rely on them for your installations, it's true that you may become, may find yourself looking for the equivalent Dracut incantations, because there is not one-to-one direct compatibility with all the boot arguments that Linux supports and the ones that Dracut support. It basically allows to do the same. It's the main way of running Linux nowadays. It's an upstream project, but you may need to adapt a little bit your boot arguments. So again, I want now to focus on the bottom right part of the whole process, which is Agama itself as a replacement for YaST. And this is the last conceptual or last theoretical slide before we jump into the presentation, into the demo, sorry. So I believe that it's important to know a little bit about the architecture to better understand the demo. So as you can see there, we could say that Agama is composed of two big blocks. One will be Agama, or what we could call Agama core. That is basically the part doing the job, running the installation, doing the partitioning, etc., etc. And then you can control that engine, let's say, with several interfaces or with several clients. The communication is done through HTTP protocol. Of course, it's usually secured, so it's HTTPS in the end, but the communication is in the end HTTP-based protocol. And we provide a command line interface, so you can drive the whole installation just using a text interface. We also provide a graphical one, which is actually based on web technologies. And there's another box there because actually you could connect to that API and control the process with any other tool, for example, integrating that into your infrastructure. Or this could be used by SUSE Manager, or not SUSE Manager anymore, SUSE Multi-Linux Manager, to drive the whole process. We are not encouraging you to build your own plugin right here, right now, because the API is still changing. But after the release of SLES 16, it will be stable enough so you can plug it into your own infrastructure. And going for the Agama core part, the one thing I want to remark is that, as you can see there, most of the core job is still done by YaST underneath, by the YaST libraries, by the YaST algorithms. Because we actually believe YaST is the best installer out there in terms of managing different scenarios, combinations of hardware, and all secure boot on top of an encrypted partition with a write and LVM, and you name it. And that case has already been tested with YaST. That has already happened, and we already have an algorithm for it. So we are reusing all those parts. So mostly the hard parts are still there. Although it's true that for some other parts we are rewriting some components, for example, in the case of localization. There is no need to have the whole logic of YaST to do all the localization, because now things are simpler with systemd, it's more unified. So, for example, this part we are just rewriting it. And also for the network, since SLES 16 is switching from Wicket to Network Manager, we had to rewrite that part anyway. So instead of just rewriting or rewiring the YaST part, we did it from scratch. But generally, for all the important things, it's still YaST there. So, enough theory, let's do some demo. So for that, I have this virtual machine here that I will just boot. And I just inserted this installation media I mentioned. So I will just do a small thing just to ease the remote administration. Actually, this is not needed. There are many ways to do this. But yeah, for the demo, I believe this is the most convenient. So as I said, this is the installation media. Although technically you already know it's quite different from the installation media of a previous SLES. From the user point of view, it's exactly the same. It's booting a Linux, and then we'll boot a graphical session. And in that graphical session, you will have a graphical application to do the installation. You already know, because I showed you that the graphical UI is actually web-driven, that what we are actually doing is opening a full-screen Firefox. That's basically it. So you will The local interface is simply the browser interface in full screen. And for now, we are still using X11 to all this graphical thingy, but it will switch to Wayland soon, because in SLES 16, another of the important changes is that we will try to switch everything to Wayland and drop X. So first step, I need to select a distribution to install. Okay, that's easy. And then it takes me, to the summary screen. And this is the first big difference with YaST. In YaST, I would go through a wizard with several steps, one by one, like partitioning, system role, blah, 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 before I'm able to just click install. But here I'm in a summary, explaining what is going to happen, and I click on install right away. Not fully true, because at least I have to set authentication, because otherwise it will be a nice install system in which I cannot log in. But other than that, I could skip any of the sections. Of course, that doesn't mean I need to skip them. I can just change the storage, localization. We will go through many of them now. But let's start with authentication. And that's also another change. In SLES 16, there will be a different configuration of sudo, so you don't really have to rely necessarily on the root user. You can have just a first user using sudo to grant admin permissions, or you could configure the root authentication, or of course both. So now I will be able to just click on install. I have not really gone through all the other sections, but I'm not going to do that yet. Why we did that change? Well, actually this wizard way of working just was limiting us in many improvements we wanted to do. For example, we already introduced an improvement in recent version of YaST, which are called the security profiles, that allows you to define if you want the resulting system to conform to some security standard like DISASTIC or FIPS, or I don't know, the creative criteria or creative, what is it called? Whatever. But that always have implications, that if you decide that you want to go for some security certification, then you should have changed the partitioning, you should change the settings of the user. So it's never a wizard. You take decisions that affect other sections, and if with a wizard you cannot change that anymore. So that's one of the reasons we decided to change it, and also at the end of the presentation you will even understand better why we are changing this. And then we have the overview, the registration, localization, nothing too special to explain here. So language, keyword, and time zone. Network, I could play with it, but in a live demo, I'm kind of reluctant to play with the network configuration. And for example, storage, as you can see, this has changed a lot also to make the configuration of unattended and interactive systems closer. So you can see here that I can select to install. I have a Windows disk and a Linux one. This is going to replace everything, as it says here. I could, of course, decide to not replace everything, but to shrink the system partition, that it will automatically calculate the best distribution, that is sharing the boot EFI with the existing Windows, while shrinking the Windows partition and locating the space there. But actually, I would prefer to replace my SLES on the second disk. And again, since this is set to shrinking, it will just shrink the existing SLES and install the other one alongside. I may decide to, for example, reuse the existing swap instead of creating a new one. That also can be easily done. And you can see there that's the change, but actually for the demo I prefer to delete everything. It's just a demo system after all. And you see how all the sizes are recalculated. I can, of course, also set encryption. And in this particular case, I have to set the password score, of course. And in this particular case, for example, this simulated machine has a TPM. That means I can check that checkbox, and then the encryption will be enrolled into the TPM. I don't need to interactively type it on every boot. That's quite convenient for servers and cloud deployments and so on. That's also, yeah. The option, of course, will not be there if there is no TPM chip. Well, there are many more options in storage, but I really want to move on to others, especially to software, because the software section also allows me to explain something that, as I said, there are no those steps in a wizard anymore, and one of the steps was to select the system role. The system roles were used for many things. For example, for these security certifications that we actually want to extract into a separate concept, but also to just select the role of the machine. And we were looking at them, and 85% of the system roles, or even more, were just about selecting software. Whatever the role you selected, you were just selecting a different set of patterns to install, except for a few roles that really had a real, more significant role. So we decided that we already have patterns for that. So system roles was just became an over complicated way of selecting software. So we are relying back on patterns, but when you're using the web interface, and that's also another difference, that here in the software section, you will only see a curated list of patterns, basically patterns that play the same role that the system role used to play. So this is not defined, this is defined by product. This is the initial list of curated patterns decided by the SLES developers. It may change before the final release, of course. So we are just in the initial phases. And of course, these patterns are not exclusive to each other. That was a main problem with the roles. You have to select one and not the others. So the selection of software was exclusive with no good reason. Now, of course, some patterns may conflict and you will not be able to select them, but as long as they don't conflict, you can just select a couple of them and go on. And as I said, of course, Agama has the ability to select individual packages or to select some patterns that are not in this curated list, but you will not see it in the UI. But we will see now how you can actually choose them. But that's basically all I wanted to show about the local installation. That, well, so far so good. It's different from YaST, it's true. It's the wizard is not the wizard and so on, but basically it's more or less the same kind of beast. So what about other scenarios, like for example, remote installation? Many of you do remote installation, and for those you use SSH or VNC, which are great tools, of course, but definitely not as ubiquitous as a web browser. So everybody has a web browser even on his pocket. So I could just open a web browser from my machine. Should I? Maybe. Wait a moment. This will have worked nicely. Let me check something if something went wrong. So I will just use the IP. You know the famous demo effect? Okay, not sure why name resolution didn't work. Yeah, whatever. It announced its fingerprint and everything. That allows me to show you that if you switch to a text console, it will be announcing the fingerprint and everything, so I can use the fingerprint to decide if I trust. And here I can use the password that you already saw me introducing while logging it. Okay. So going back to the demo, here I can access the very same web interface. And this is a fully responsive interface. So let's use this nice trick from Firefox to emulate several devices. Let's say I want to configure things from my mobile phone, kind of an iPhone, whatever. It's obviously there's not much horizontal space there, so it will automatically hide the sections that are here and will show all the administration in a more vertical part. Let's say maybe a mobile phone is too much. Let's say we have a tablet, like an iPad, then you see that the storage section looks more closer to what was there, but all still with the sections hidden. Unless I turn around the device, now there is plan for everything and it looks pretty okay. So it's fully responsive, and not only that, it's fully synchronized with what I do in all the interfaces. So just to show up things a bit, so I have back there my local UI, here my browser, and let's decide I want to change the selection of software, And as you can see, it's already changing automatically also in the local. So all interfaces I'm using to control either local, remote, and all the others that we will see now are automatically synchronized. So that's about graphical remote installation, but what if you prefer a text-based one? Well, for that, as I said, we also have another client, which is my terminal. Wait a moment. Okay, I was opening my. So here I can open an X term in the live image. It's just a bit small. I guess this is better. So I have the command line interface in which I can just do Agama. And I have several commands at my disposal, like config, install. It's readable enough, or do you want to see it bigger?
I will.
Okay, I can make it bigger. Yeah, I saw some people doing like this. I kind of understood you want it bigger. Okay, so now there are all the options, all the actions I'm doing through the web interface, I can do it with this command line. This command line as the graphical one, so this interface as the graphical one can also be used remotely. So I could just SSH to the machine or open an external on the machine, or I could just have a central machine where I have Agama command line installed and then manage everything from there. From that, I will use this dash API command to point to the machine if I know the IP, because name resolution can fail in a demo. And then I will just run the auth command to enter that SUSECon 2025, and from there I will be able to manage it also remotely. And well, here I can, as I said, basically show the configuration, which is a nice JSON summary of everything you saw on the interface. I could load my own configuration from a file. Let's call it profile, in case that rings any bell. And that configuration can be the whole Agama configuration of just a section, so I can override just part of it. But here I don't have any profile already prepared, so I will do something else, which is just editing the configuration with my favorite editor, which of course is Beam. So it will open the editor and you can change anything, and when you write it, it will go to the configuration. And that also allows me to, so for example, here you see the bootloader configuration that you will not find in the web UI. That's another of the important differences. Well, it's not the difference, it's actually the same in AutoYaST. This interface, the command line, have access to the full power of Agama, which doesn't mean that all those features should be in the UI, and we actually believe they shouldn't be in the UI. So let me remove kind of most of the noise here to just edit a couple of sections. For example, let's say we do this partial profile, and I create here, come on, I will create a user for myself. And I will change the keyword to something else, just so that you can change two interfaces at once. I don't know many keyword shortcuts by out of my head, so I know that check exists and it's like that, so I will use just check. And now, well, if I go here, you can see that authentication has already changed. We already have the same shows here in the local one, but I have the X term so big that you cannot see the local interface behind, but everything is updated automatically. So now the keyword is in check, and the system is configured with a local user and so on. So that's about the two possible interfaces I already explained, that the command line and in this initial graph. You remember there was also 3 dots that were for yourself to fill. So, and for that, I just wanted to show very briefly how easy it is to have your own system integrated into all this. So now this is a terminal on my local machine that I have a couple of scripts here. All of them are one-liners, except, well, this first one is actually like 3-liner, which is the one about authenticating. So it's just one curl command, so it's just throwing an HTTP request, providing the password, and then storing the headers it will get into a file, so I can use it in subsequent calls. Like now I'm authenticated. No, I'm not.
The IP.
Oh, the IP is using. Yeah. No, I have to change the IP because the name solution seems to be broken. It was 38? Yeah, 38. Okay, now I'm authenticated. And I can, for example, just change, because I use check just to have something to change, but I really don't want my final system to be installed with a check keyboard, because I will not be able to do basically nothing. So I will edit the keymap here as well with the IP, sorry for that. And let me show it. Apart from editing the IP, as you can see, it's just one single curl command. Again, just sending one HTTP request. And if I do so, you see that the interface automatically changed to Spanish, and now the system I'm installing will be with the Spanish keyboard. So you have all those possibilities to control the installation. So let's install, but to make it a bit more spectacular, instead of clicking on install, I will just run Agama install command. That you can see is a start preparing the disk and all things. Even the browser, you already saw that it flickered because it's now showing the progress. And even I have just one more one-liner to show you, which is a one-liner script to monitor the process, which is just opening. This case, I also will have to change it. Just opening the WebSocket and listening to the WebSocket, and that's it. And with that,
yes.
If I manage to do it before the installation ends, I should see all the installation messaging coming across. So I guess some of you are already connecting the dots and how all this can be used to build your own unattended installation, or how this JSON configuration of Agama really resembles our beloved AutoYaST profile. Well, beloved, but hardly readable AutoYaST profile compared to this JSON configuration that we were able to edit. But yeah, to explain more about all that, how all this fits into the unattended installation, we have Imad here, who happens to be one of the biggest world experts in AutoYaST, I would say, so he can probably do it better.
There is something like that, yeah.
So,
okay, so let's have a look to how the unattended installation in Agama works. I guess that you have more or less have an idea of how they will finally work. Unlike YaST and AutoYaST, in Agama, we don't have different workflows for the auto installation and the regular installation. You can see the auto installation as some kind of a 3-steps process, where in the first phase, you just load the configuration profile, just the example that Anchor did just a few minutes ago. It's like if you go to the web UI and click around and set the different values, you can do that from the command line. Then you can start the installation just as Anchor just already did. As said, it will perform the same operations that the regular installation. It's not the case in AutoYaST and YaST. There might be some slightly differences between both of them, but in this case, the core is exactly the same. And then, well, there is a final step to reboot the system or to shut it down, depending on your preferences. But one of the most important changes is that from AutoYaST is the change from XML to JSON. The reasons is that we think that JSON is these days is more readable, is more concise, and it's elsewhere. And also, we are not losing any functionality. For instance, we used to check profiles, AutoYaST profiles for validation and so on. We still can check JSON profiles using JSON schema, so we are not losing anything. And we are also opening the door to having a more easy way to create dynamic profiles, because you can use JSON, or you can use, if you prefer, JSONnet, which is basically kind of a superset of JSON that give you all the typical elements from a programming language, variables, functions, loops, whatever. In the AutoYaST world, you used to have a script that modified the profile in place if you wanted, for instance, a profile that was adapting itself depending on the system it was installing. And in this case, we are not. We are trying to have something contained in the profile, so you can have pretty complex extracts in the profile and create your profiles from there in a dynamic way. So this door is open by using an option like JSONnet. JSONnet is not an alien language. It's developed by Google and it's used in the Kubernetes world and Grafana, etc. So it's not something unknown. So, well, Anchor already did some spoiler. You might be thinking that you should replace your AutoYaST profiles with something else. You should do some painful conversion. But the truth is that when we started to build Agama, we wanted it to be a drop-in replacement for AutoYaST. The truth is that when you are running an attended installation, you don't need to issue all those commands, Agama config, Agama install, etc. It will work in a similar way to AutoYaST. You just give Agama a URL when booting, and it will follow a similar approach. It will get the JSON file from whatever URL you have told, and it's also able to understand AutoYaST-like URLs. I mean, not only HTTP, HTTPS, etc., but also label and devise those creative URLs from YaST and AutoYaST world that are pretty useful for us. So it follows exactly the same mechanism. The cool thing is that if Agama detects that you are using an AutoYaST profile, it's going to automatically convert that profile to something it understands. Okay? So you can give Agama a JSON file, you can give Agama a JSONnet file, but if you give your AutoYaST profile, it's going to try to convert that profile to something that it can handle. This feature was introduced a few weeks ago. In this case, Agama has detected that it's working with an AutoYaST profile, and it tells you, okay, there are a few things that I don't know how to do. In this case, there are many AutoYaST elements that are not fully understood by Agama. And it also tells you in the left side, proxy and service manager will be implemented in the future, something for that. But these elements are not supposed to be implemented in the future. The reason is that, as we have said, Agama is just an installer. It's not going to do any additional configuration and may not have exactly the same features that AutoYaST had. Okay? Anyway, it is able to handle quite some things: the software configuration, product registration. It's able to run scripts, and all those features that are present in your AutoYaST profile are going to be handled by Agama, converted, and processed as expected. However, there were two parts of those AutoYaST profiles that were concerning for us about how to handle them. And I guess that many of you, if you use AutoYaST, how many of you make use of AutoYaST usually? Well, I'm pretty sure that you have worked with pre-installation profiles, pre-installation scripts, pools and classes, and ERB, and all those tricks that make an AutoYaST profile dynamic. And that's something that was concerning for us. And the other one was how to handle storage. About the first one, about dynamic profiles, I have good news. We are basically using pretty much the same code that AutoYaST does. As Anchor said, there are many parts of YaST that are still there in Agama. So it will handle the pre-installation scripts. It will modify the script in place, the AutoYaST script in place. It will execute rules and classes if needed, etc. And then it will convert that result into an Agama profile. And for storage, it's a little bit tricky because we have that partitioning section in AutoYaST profiles. We have seen some of them are really complex. So we follow the next approach. If you are using an AutoYaST profile, it's not going to do any kind of conversion. Again, it's going to use the same code that AutoYaST uses to create the partitions. But if you want to change to a JSON-based option, there is a special compatibility mode that is called legacy for a reason, but it's legacy AutoYaST storage. And at this point in time, it's able to just, let's say, a direct conversion from XML to JSON, and it will work in the same way that the AutoYaST counterpart will do. Of course, Agama ships its own way to define the partitioning, which we think is pretty superior to the AutoYaST one. But while you are going from one solution to the other, you can still rely on some legacy support. OK. So I guess that now it's clear what AutoYaST is. Sorry, what AutoYaST is clear, but what Agama is and what is not. Let's have a look to what to expect for Agama for SLES 16. At this point in time, we are focused on adding more features to the unattended installation. As we have said, not all the features that are in unattended installation are available yet in the web user interface. But we are focused now in that Agama core, let's say. These days, if you want to do an installation with an MD rate or sort of advanced BTRFS functions or whatever, they are not directly supported in the new syntax in Agama. So you need to rely on an AutoYaST profile or to use the legacy mode in the unattended installation, but there is no web UI support for those scenarios, and it won't be ready for SLES 16. Only on the web user interface, using an unattended installation, it will be there. We are working in providing better software management, for instance, being able to install individual packages. This feature is not going to be in the web user interface, but it will be, again, in the unattended mode. And we are also adding some features that are important to replace AutoYaST profiles, like being able to deploy full configuration files. There is a file section in AutoYaST and another section that we should support. So for SLES 16, expect some kind of reduced features in the web UI. What you see in the demo is everything is there. There will be more stuff, but there is quite some specialized stuff that will be available in the backend, let's say. And we are also putting quite some effort into making the AutoYaST transition as easy as possible. Okay? So if you happen to give it a try to Agama, and especially to the AutoYaST migration, just let us know what you think and what you need for the future. And what happens once SLES 16 is released? Well, we have many ideas in mind. There is a roadmap. I will give you the link because we have a homepage for Agama, and there is a roadmap with many features. That roadmap can change, but well, if you ask me, I will say that the most interesting features are, one of them, security profiles, because the way they are implemented in YaST, we think that we can do it better, and we want to give another opportunity to this part. We are going to bring more features to the web user interface, especially when it comes to storage and network. From the web user interface, it's kind of limited, but it's pretty powerful under the hood. And we also want to work more about making the integration with other tools easier, having a monitor command, so you can use curl, but if you have a more powerful command line interface, you don't need to. Well, and I would say that's basically it. Here you have the Agama website. There is documentation, there is a blog, actually, a roadmap, etc. There is another session in this SUSECon, which is recorded. It's called Beyond AutoYaST, and it's basically focused on explaining how the unattended installation works with many more details and many more examples. And we are available and will be the whole SUSECon in the SLES Future Look there, the kiosk. So just feel free to join us and ask for any question that you can have. That's it. Thank you.